Shane Waldron is hired as the Chicago Bears offensive coordinator. Jaylen Johnson is continuing his contract negotiations. The Chicago Bears have brought in a couple names for defensive coordinator interviews, but frankly, nothing all too fast. And Nick and I need to talk through why I keep getting so sick, as well as what the Bears are probably going to do at 109 this time. Let's set 101 aside. We'll talk about all this and more on this episode of Bear With Us. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Bear With Us. I'm Robert Schmitz, editor-in-chief of the Bears blog and Chicago Bears obsessed fan, along with my co-host, Nick Whalen of Football Guys, also a Chicago Bears obsessed fan. And we're here to bring you the best Bears podcast that we possibly can. And Nick, what great news as the Chicago Bears have locked in their offensive coordinator in former Seattle Seahawks OC, Shane Waldron. I'll give you the floor first. What do you think of the move?
Well, I think, one, he was my 101 pick, right, of offensive coordinators. And I know a lot of people will say, well, there's some Seattle people that are happy that he's gone, etc. You need to remember, everybody, that no offensive coordinator is loved by everyone. Even Andy Reid has those stupid short yardage plays that he calls. Like, if you call
I
the
think
play
you
and it
mean Matt
works,
Nagy. Those are
yeah,
the
yeah.
Nagy plays, right?
Yeah. What who is that, who was it, Bradley Soul, or who is that guy he threw a touchdown to? Do you remember that for a
Oh,
touchdown?
man. I don't remember
The
the name,
the
but
3rd offensive tackle? You know what I'm talking about, the
yeah, I
play?
do know what you're talking
You're
about.
like, what are you thinking, trying to be the genius, but n if it works, you're a genius, if it doesn't, you're an idiot. But in terms of experience, places that he's been, and the other part, I think the most important thing that I'm excited about, Robert, is one of the best offensive coordinator candidates decided he wanted to come to Chicago.
Yes.
This wasn't the bargain bin that people always think that we go with. And the thing that I didn't realize, I guess, besides Luke Getzey being a first-time NFL play caller and only 1 year of college play calling, the quarterback coach, Andrew, is it Jocko, right?
Mhm.
He only had 1 year of quarterbacking experience in the NFL
Oh, yeah.
coaching. And
Oh,
so,
yeah.
like, having a guy with multiple years of experience is a breath of fresh air.
To me, that's the thing, right? Like, we've talked about this on the show before that I was not going to subject myself to some kind of full offensive analysis of all of the candidates because
Mhm,
that's just way too much work for no payoff whatsoever. But
mhm.
Shane Waldron hit all the marks that I could hope for, right? I mean, he had not one, not two, but 3 years of play calling experience. He had all kinds of experience with really intriguing offensive minds. I mean, he was there from the jump street with Sean McVay, which you don't have to think too hard about the whole like, oh wow, he knew Sean McVay. He met Sean McVay at a porta potty once, so therefore we might as well make him a head coach. Like, we're not trying to go there so much as the offensive rooms that Shane Waldron has been a part of are impressive ones, and that's going to rub off on your thinking at some point. And then when we got to demonstrate his, or when we got to see him demonstrate his thinking with two quarterbacks, I mean, that's just talking about the starters. We saw two pretty solid games from Drew Lock as well. So if you want to throw him in there, you absolutely can. And we've seen the offense change identities and shift and bend with the quarterbacks. We've seen some stuff that we'll get into later. I have watched a little bit of tape, and I can't wait to share at least what I've seen. But from a top level perspective, Nick, I think the other thing that a lot of Bears fans look, I know that a lot of them aren't going to like hearing this, right? But the OC market is threadbare every single year. There's nothing anybody wants more than the new Wonderkind OC. And because of that, people keep changing their offensive coordinator. Did you realize, Nick, that now since 2022, every single team in the NFL has changed their offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I did, because the longest coordinator was, I believe, Brian Callahan.
Mhm.
Well, it was the guy with the Saints who Pete Carmichael, and he got let go. And then it was Brian Callahan. He just got a head job. Like, it just keeps churning all the
It
time,
just
y'all.
keeps churning because you're either bad enough to get fired or you're good enough to get a head coaching job. I mean,
Mhm.
let me use my favorite example. Man, Nick, I couldn't hire Bobby Slowick with a straight face, right? Like, maybe this is the part of me that just wants experience in a lot of these guys. When people talk about Kyle Shanahan, I'm like, yeah, he called plays for like almost 10 years, if memory serves. We saw him get an offensive coordinator job at Atlanta. We saw him get offensive coordinator jobs all over the country. I'm not surprised he was flexible and ready for his tenure with the 49ers. right? But Shane Waldron is exactly the kind of name that I know I look at and say, well, he wasn't supposed to be available. And he obviously thought Chicago was a destination employer, which that's sweet from
Yep.
an offensive
Yep.
coordination perspective. Do you want to get into why, or do we want to just agree to leave the why and the speculation at the door and just say, hey, he thought Chicago rules. We think Chicago rules, and literally just move on from there?
I because I well, I don't think that we get any conclusions from it, but
Yes.
I do have a very nice thread from Brad Spielberger, again, a guy that I highly recommend. He's a
Hmm.
friend from PFF, really good with salary cap numbers, but he has a analytics view of Shane Waldron from the Seahawks. Did you see this thread or no?
Oh, yeah, and it's
All
awesome.
right.
Read it all.
Yeah, so I think y'all need to hear this. So again, this is again whether people love the analytics or not, this is more data, and the more data that we have, the better decisions and mindsets that we can have. So this is Shane Waldron from the 3 years as OC with the Seahawks, which again we have to remember, as you said, Drew Lock had starts there. Geno Smith got resurrected basically his career, and he had 1 year of Russell Wilson. So overall, he was 12th in EPA per play,
Hmm.
his offenses, 13th in success rate, 8th in EPA per rush, and 14th in EPA per dropback. Um, I'll go through just I don't have to go through all of them. I'll just go through some of them here. 6th in yards per play, 12th in TD drive rate, 11th in series conversion rate. So again, you're kind of flipping the fields a bit there. Ninth in pass rate, ninth in explosive pass play rate, 14th in play action rate. We love play action, y'all. Third in deep pass rate. Wow, doesn't that sound better than screens, y'all?
Right.
Um, there are some concerns though, so I think we have to address that. This isn't just all sunshines and rainbows. 23rd in third down conversion rate and 26th in red zone TD rate. And I talk about that all the time when we talk about teams. That's when you get to the red zone and you convert that to a touchdown, not just a field goal. So that's 26th. But overall, I've got into some debates with people on this, Robert. They were like, well, they were 21st in scoring this year. And I said, well, yeah, overall scoring. But you have to look at how many drives that they had. When you look at like points per drive, they were like 12th in the NFL, which is the real thing. That means the defense wasn't stopping anybody, and they had a bad defense.
They did have a bad defense. And it's so funny, right? Because the only game that I've watched, just to cite my sources, everybody, is the late December game against Pittsburgh. And in the early goings of the game, they score a bunch of touchdowns. So, as far as the red zone percentage stuff that I've seen there, like I haven't seen it show up yet. But the intriguing part to me about this, Nick, is so we're going away from Luke Getzey. We're going to Shane Waldron. There are going to be a lot of people that are going to wonder, well, what does that mean? Right. And
Yeah.
who's to say how much of Luke Getzey's offense is tied up in players, right? How much of it is stuff Justin liked? How much of it is stuff that the offensive line was ready for? How much of it was Chris Morgan's ideas? How much of it is stuff that's here to stay? Who's to say? We don't know, right? But Nick, I am happy to report Shane is really heavy on short dropbacks. So 1 steps, 3 steps, and you'll see some 5 steps, and that is about as high as it goes. It felt like Shane places a really heavy priority on get the quarterback to his drop spot with lightweight combinations that are on in some cases you'll have like a man beater on your left side, zone beater on your right side, pretty
Mhm.
standard offensive coordination, but the goal is that they're going to resolve pretty quickly so that you can bump into go be a football player at around the 3 second mark or so. And I feel like this really helped Geno play within a poor offensive line ecosystem because it got him basically thinking creatively throughout the course of at least this Pittsburgh game, where there's well more than one situation where the play goes bust immediately, but Geno makes a play out of it because he knows where his guys are and he knows where he's looking for an answer within the coverage that he's seeing because the Steelers run a lot of really good disguises. I mean, they run some what 2 high to 1 high look. They run some 2 invert. They run some like 6 to 8. They run some some stuff where it's like you go from a too high look to cover four. Honestly, the Steelers defense was really impressive when I was watching them, at least
Mhm.
from a coordination perspective. And so what Shane seems like he wants to do is to give his quarterback one to two or like a couple answers pre-snap, one to two answers in the middle of the play. Watch this defender. If he goes here, just freaking throw the ball. And honestly, I think the Bears could use a little bit of that because if you saw the same thing I did, I have never seen an offense that acted like it was an offensive line of all pros, quite like Chicago, because the amount of concepts we saw that were 3.5 to 4 second resolutions was just unbelievable. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if you just think of it overall, that you could trade away Russell Wilson, bring in Geno Smith, who is just a journeyman, along with Drew Lock in that trade, and Geno becomes a player that you pay a new contract to. I mean, this is just like what Baker Mayfield's went through this year, y'all. Like he all of a sudden you're like, wait, hold on, Geno can ball. And so I think when I watch their offense, I've always seen something that makes sense.
Hmm.
They have calculated big shot plays and they use space a lot better
They do.
and they use tempo a lot better and they get more plays in. Like it makes it's an actual futuristic NFL offense instead of kind of the I feel like we're always behind the curve. This is an offense that's more in front of the curve.
It's so funny to me, Nick, that you called it a futuristic offense because I would almost call it an it is somewhere. I'm going to use two adjectives, one negative, one positive. It's
Mhm.
almost an underthought offense in many cases, but I mean that in a good way, where the idea is, hey, we're going to throw a trip set on our right so that we can get DK out on our left, and DK is going to run a slant, and he's going to have all the space on earth. What are we worried about? And that's the play idea, right?
In
In
in coaching, Robert, we call that KISS, right? Keep it
kids,
simple,
keep it
stupid,
simple,
right?
stupid, right?
That's what it is.
Tons of this stuff where it's like the most creative they'll get in the run game is running inside zone with an outside zone running back track, which for anybody who's looking for what I mean by that, it means Kenneth Walker would get the handoff as if he was running stretch. So he starts with his aim point at the tackle, even though the guard and the center are both climbing up to the second level on inside zone rather than a more common outside zone theme. But I mean, Nick, it feels like the run game, the passing game, it is it's not trying to be as designer as a lot of the things that we saw with Luke Getzey, where Luke is going to come up with the exact right answer to the exact right defense all the time. There's a
Mhm,
lot more, at least it seems this way, flexibility in let the players play. This
yep,
idea of, hey, at the end of the day, Gino, if I call this play and you can't run it, what's the point? So
mhm,
I'm going to call
mhm,
this play. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Figure something out.
yep.
And it got Gino playing quickly and comfortably, and more power to your players when you
Well,
can call a game like that.
and the other thing too, man, is like Gino, I mean, he got injured a little bit this year, and the little part of the end of last year, he fell off a little bit, but he was like playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at some point. It's not like, I mean, it's Geno Smith, y'all. Okay, like, I'm rooting for Geno, just like I rooted for Baker, but you're not like it's Baker Mayfield. You're like he's, Pat Mahomes is just buried in there. You're like, well, there's still some limitations. Like he made it all work, but like back to like the part when it got announced that Shane Waldron was, I don't know, the Bears wanted to interview him.
Mhm.
I When I read that, my first thought, Robert, was like, okay, yeah, they want to interview him, but he's not, he's gonna like decline the interview. It doesn't mean they are interviewing. I was like, yeah, sure, like Shane Waldron's actually gonna come to Chicago. And then I saw more and more of the guys that they were interviewing, and I was like, maybe they are actually getting interviews with like good candidates. And then this hire happens, but I'm just impressed with the whole process. It wasn't rushed. They didn't have, the cheap. I mean, this can't be the cheapest offensive coordinator out there. Like,
No.
it seems like the whole thing has shifted. And I know, everyone has well, the Bears aren't going to be good until they have new ownership or whatever. Ted Phillips is not the head guy there. It's the Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles show. And this isn't we all heard this, right? Remember, they didn't switch the head coach. It's a lame duck situation. Why would Shane Waldron come here if it's a lame duck situation? He obviously is like, hey, this is a juicy spot. I want to be there. I'm the best OC candidate and I want to be there. And you know what? Clint Kubiak, Cliff Kingsbury, Greg Roman, like etc. They all came too because they thought it was juicy. So it must not be the worst situation or lame duck situation that people painted it as.
Yeah, man, I'm just saying, right there with you, right? Where it's like everybody wants to make this some kind of, oh well, it's Eberflus's third year and he hasn't won this many games. And look, you and I are not trying to be the biggest fans of Matt Eberflus, right? Like we got plenty of gripes,
Oh
especially with
yeah.
the early way that this 2023 season opened up. But for as many reports as we heard, and as common a refrain as it is around Bears Nation to say, well, yeah, they literally stripped the team down around him in 2022. What would you expect?
Yep.
What if this is exactly what the coaches internally and the front office are saying to each other? So if that's the
Mhm.
case, then that means this was Eberflus's first year. And it
Yep.
could have gone way worse.
Yeah.
Like once they traded for Montez Sweat and basically turned the team around. I mean, look, I'm going to hit you with a statement that I think is kind of corny and campy, but they held the Packers to less points than they allowed all the rest of the season. Like the Packers in the playoffs scored more points on their opponents than they scored on the Bears in week 18, which,
Yep.
it's not like the Bears forced a punt or anything. So,
What? And that was at home. The Packers did that, and then on the road in Dallas, on the road in San Francisco is a very different story. So I have one small point, and then I actually have I'm gonna shift the conversation, whether you want to go there or not, but just 2 points here. So one
okay.
is I already have an idea because so one positive I like about Flus. I don't know if everyone likes this or not. I like it. He has nicknames for everybody, and I think that's fun. Like I like that part about him, right? So like the nickname for Shane Waldron. Okay.
Yeah.
I have one. I have an idea of what it could be. Do you have an idea of what his nickname could be?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, like, I think I'm right. Just to be
All
honest
right,
with
what,
you.
what, what do you think it is?
I think it's gonna be Waldo. I think then
Okay.
Eberflus is gonna walk around and be like, "Where's Waldo?" And then he's gonna
All right.
snicker
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
to his offense, like left and right, like, "Hey, where's Waldo at? Where's Waldo?"
Yeah. Yeah.
But what do you think?
I was thinking Walmart.
Oh,
You know what I mean? So something Walmart. You know what I mean? Like, where's the Walmart special? Like, however
right.
he'll have fun with it. But the other thing is you let into this in 109, y'all. We talk forever. Justin, Caleb, Drake May barely gets talked about, y'all. I mean, it's a possibility. Let's put it there. But like that conversation is like 95% of Bears Twitter. And there's so many other things to get excited about. And that's why we're going to talk about a lot more in this pod. But you had mentioned this, and this is what's got me maybe shifting my gears on 109. You said once Montez Sweat came to Chicago, things changed, right? The whole
Oh
team.
yeah.
It wasn't just the defense. Like we were winning games. The defense started playing well because he's a multiplier. He's a pass rusher, and you got
Yes.
to see what a pass rush could do for defense. And that was only one of them, y'all. The other one is dog. Like bad, bad. So so my idea for 109,
Give it
and
to me.
we're hearing more and more that the top three receivers might not be there. What if you got another pass rusher at 109,
Oh,
and then all of
see.
a sudden you got two multipliers? And as we saw with, the 49ers had a bad corner, and Green Bay, obviously, their safeties and one of their corners, and Jair for half the season didn't play very well. Like you can go through the list. They all survived because they had a pass rush.
Mhm.
And again, we know. And again, I just maybe I have so much faith in Poles. Like he's not like the well, we'll just figure it out. He's innovative. Like last year, he had the Madden trade. I'm gonna go down to a 2, and I'm gonna go down to 9. Like
Right.
he's my guy. He's got to be thinking about let's generate way more pass rush, and it's just gonna elevate the defense from very good to maybe elite. Dallas Turner, man, is like the guy I am almost zeroed in on at 109. Although there's some other ones I like too. But getting a guy that can rush the passer, who's good against the defense, who's going to be 21 for his entire rookie season, and has I think the highest ceiling of that group of pass rushers at 109, opposite Sweat, just really gets me excited.
So, Nick, I don't want to burst your bubble. There's no sense bursting your bubble. I think right now, a bunch of draft media, and I love draft media, right? I
Mhm.
don't mean this as a criticism. is forgetting that Dallas Turner is the clear-cut number one option at edge, and he's not going to make it to 9. I
I
mean, like,
know.
freezing cold takes me if this doesn't happen, right? But, like, whether it's Tennessee, whether it's the Giants, I mean, of course it's easy for us to say, well, the
Atlanta.
Giants would never not pass on or a wide receiver. You know, it's funny because I bet you there's probably, what do you think, 12, 14 organizations in the NFL right now that still do not believe in the top 10 wide receiver. Like, just as a concept. You know
Oh,
what
I
I'm
get it.
saying?
Yeah. Yep.
And
Yep.
an
And
edge
it
rusher. Yeah.
and I think the combine will determine a lot more because if Turner balls out, which I expect him to and be a freak,
You know he's going to be a
he'll
freak.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Like he'll
he,
rise up. Now again, like I don't think Dallas Turner's like a Miles Garrett prospect, y'all. He's not an Aiden Hutchinson prospect. He's a notch below that, in my opinion,
I think
because
he
he's
might.
not as developed as those guys. He didn't show out as much, but I think that he's not gonna be Miles Garrett. He could maybe be a poor version of Aiden Hutchinson. He could be like in that realm, I think. Could
You
definitely
say
happen.
that. It's funny you mention Aiden, right? Like, I think I think he's absolutely an Aiden prospect, me
Really?
personally. Like, just because it is hard to find that kind of natural bend, that
Yeah.
kind of explosiveness, that kind of power. And yeah, of course, he's raw from the technique perspective, but you
Mhm.
see that athleticism pop and pop and pop again on that
Well,
on that Alabama tape. And if memory serves, when Aiden Hutchinson did get drafted 2 overall, it was a pretty weak draft in 2022. And so,
let's not forget that Trayvon Walker went 101, and everyone forgets that, and the
oh,
Jaguars completely whiffed. They
they
coulda had a Hutchinson there,
they
and that would
completely whiffed.
change them. They would be in the playoffs right now. But the other thing I like with Turner too is, like, as a freshman, sophomore, really, he was only good at that long arm technique, and
Right.
so for y'all to describe that to you, that would be just one defensive end. If I'm coming around the right tackle, let's say it's Darnell Wright, right? I'm pushing one arm into his chest because one arm straight is actually longer than two arms engaged. And that's one very big pass rushing move. But now he has counters off of that, Robert. He's
Mhm.
got the chop, he's got the swim, he's got the dip, he's got the counters inside. And so you can see this guy is just layering and layering his pass rushing moves, and it's exciting.
Oh, it's super exciting. If anything, Nick, it's funny we talk about 109, right? Because the obvious answer is a guy like Roma Dunze. Now that the Bears
Mhm.
have hired Shane Waldron, another little Waldron fact, right, is that he loves heavy personnel. So he likes using 2 tight ends and 3 tight ends more than nearly anybody. So
Yep.
everybody is now connecting Brock Bowers to Shane Waldron's Bears, and I don't see anything wrong with that, right? It's just that whenever I watch Bowers, I see an athlete that is exceptional, especially at the college level, at basically being a huge receiver. And I got to tell you, Nick, there is part of me that looks at that and goes, I can't get Kyle Pitts out of my head, right? Like,
I gotcha.
usage is just so important. And it sure feels as if there are some of these offensive coordinators that just don't end up creative enough to like leverage
Mhm.
these weird packet or like these weird players. Cause I'm not trying to say Bowers is weird, but you're going to end up with teams that are going to line him up against DB. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like there are going to be some teams that treat him as a wide receiver schematically. And then there are going to be
Mhm.
some teams that treat him as a tight end, and those teams are just going to get baked. Like with linebackers on Brock Bowers, yeah, good luck. But so all of
I
this, what?
oh, go ahead.
All of
I
this,
was
it's my turn now. All of this to say, I can't help but sit here, Nick, and mutter to myself that we're just incomplete on what we're going to do, like in general, for me to tell you what I think the Bears are going to do at 9. There's a bunch of incredibly exciting options, but I am more certain that the Bears don't want to go from 9 to 75 and skip the second round than nearly anything in this. So,
Mhm.
are they going to trade everybody's favorite number one wearing quarterback? Is that going to draw a second round pick? Maybe that's the answer, right?
Mm.
Every time I run a mock draft simulator right now, I get offered some really juicy trade package from 9 down to like late teens and early 20s. And I think that's
Mhm.
an intriguing option because the other thing that's not being talked about, Nick, Bears fan, here's the way that I would put this: the second tier of receivers in this draft is exactly the same tier of receivers that we saw JSN, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, and the fourth one. Who was it? Remind me.
Zay Flowers.
Zay Flowers.
Who
all
who
fall
who's
into.
my number 1, by the way,
Hey,
last
there
year?
you go. Like, if anything, I'm realizing that I showed my draft newness with how much I love Jackson Smith-Jigba. Not that I'm walking any of it back. He's a very good player, right?
Yeah.
But if JSN is a tier 1 wide receiver, then Rome, Malik, and Marvin Harrison Jr. are tier 0, right? But then
Mhm.
you get to Keon Coleman, you get to Lad McCunkly, you get to Troy Franklin, you get to Devontae Walker, you get to Adonai
Brian
Mitchell.
Thomas.
Like, who was the one you just mentioned?
Brian Thomas.
Brian Thomas. Like, these guys are all in that category of receiver.
Mhm.
Very, very good. And if you fell into the late teens or early 20s, you're still going to get one. And as much as I know Bears fans, I wouldn't want to hear this if I was you. Let me put it that way, Nick. Is data actually says that that's the better move. Like, data has always pointed to second round wide receivers and late first round wide receivers generally being the move, as opposed to ultra high wide receivers. It's changing a little bit because recent data favors more Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and some of the other guys that we've seen,
Yeah.
right? But it's just not that long ago that Justin Jefferson was drafted at 18th overall. DJ Moore, if memory serves, was like a late teens pick. I mean, it's a great hot zone for talent in a
Mhm.
draft like this. And so my question to you, Nick, is if you could pick up an extra second this year, an extra second next year, and maybe a third rounder this year, would you trade down?
Well, that seems like a lot, to move down. I would absolutely do
That's
that, and
that's my
you
PFF move, right?
I
Who's
got
to
you, yeah.
say it's real?
Well, and you know what's interesting is, like, the Brock Bowers thing has me a little bit more excited, and my hot take is I think Brock Bowers is a better playmaker than Rome Odunze. I think Rome
Ooh,
Odunze, after the reception, isn't as good as people
no,
want him to be. I think he's a slightly better version of Brian Thomas to me. I really like Brian Thomas, but there's just a big guy on the outside that has a good size speed, I get, but I think Bowers can be more, but just like Justin Fields, y'all, we're seeing that it takes a special coordinator, I think, to get the most out of that type of a talent. It's going to take the right coordinator to get the most out of a Brock Bowers, especially when you already have Cole Kmet to a cheap deal. But it could be fun because I also like that when you are giving tells in terms of its run or pass,
right.
etc. But the other thing that you're not talking about too, Robert, is like there's really like 4 positions, y'all, that are like really deep this year. Okay. Receiver, we just talked about.
Yep,
I think edge has some really good depth in terms of late round 1, early round 2
I
as
agree.
well.
It falls off really hard, but it always does.
Yep. Yep. There. Offensive tackle
Oh yeah,
and corner.
yes,
So Chicago might not need a corner if we're not going to bring back, if we're going to sign Jaylen Johnson, and we'll talk about that one here in a bit. Edge we need. Tackle is a maybe, right? Depends. I would say no, but maybe. And then receiver for sure. So I think moving down and getting 2 swipes into that pot of good prospects makes more sense than 1.
I agree. And not to mention, I can't help but look at this and just think, as we talk about this, right? Like, one of the best pass rushers in the draft class. Is that even too far? You got to know who I'm talking about. Like, we talked about Dallas Turner getting picked above 9. Latui Latu is going to be there, like
Uh,
at 9. And if his medicals check out, because at the combine they're going to basically give that guy the physical of his life. Just every NFL team is going to want to know, right? And he is one of the most dangerous pass rushers,
yep.
far and away, in this class, which is really saying something. And so
Yeah.
maybe that's a direction the Bears go. I keep coming back, Nick, to the idea that the edge class in free agency is better than I've nearly ever seen it. Now, I've not been paying attention to that kind of thing for more than about the last 5 years, right? But generally speaking, I'm way more accustomed to seeing Olivier Vernon and Marcus Golden get like huge deals on the edge free agent market than I am seeing a couple actual talents like Bryce Huff as a situational third rusher, like
Right.
Daniil Hunter, who's going to hit the market. Maybe Chris Jones hits the market. Like, the defensive line free agent market actually gives the Bears some decent options. And I'm
Mhm.
dying to know what they're going to do there, because the team you and I are looking at right now, I mean, Nick, isn't this the most normal thing in the world? You and I are staring at the roster thinking, ooh, how do we draft to fix this? Well, free agency comes first. It's
I
really
know.
easy to ignore that, right?
Yeah.
And so the Bears are going to sign a receiver, whether they're going to sign a big dog like Calvin Ridley or T. Higgins, or whether they're going to go lower and basically imply to everybody that they are drafting a receiver. We will see. But edge is a position I could easily see them making a splash at, which if they did pay, let's say they paid Bryce Huff $17 million a year for the next 3 years, guaranteed 2 years fit, right? Well, now you're not thinking Dallas Turner just
Yep.
because you just paid a free agent. But
Yep.
if you don't,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just going to say this. Let's put it this way, Nick. If the board fell the right way and you got Latu Ilatu, Chris Jones, Andrew Billings, Montez Sweat with Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens in reserve with DeMarcus Walker coming off the bench too to beat up on some fresh tackles. Like, I don't want to use words that get over my skis, but goodness, if Laitu Ilatu develops pretty quickly, that could be a Super Bowl defensive line.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. And the way I always look at this right now in terms of, because you're right, I think we need to start looking a little bit more at the free agency, not just the draft, and pairing it together. So normally we wait till the end for this, but I have a Football Guys video coming out
Yeah, you do.
on fixing the Bears this offseason in 5 steps. So I go through who they're going to cut. I go through the quarterback decision. I go through free agency, and here's my
Did you cut 4?
what?
Did you cut 4?
Yeah, 4 is gone.
Oh.
4 is gone. Well, for a few, well, I'll get into
There's
some
a
of this.
few reasons.
So, but I also don't think Chicago's going to have as much cap space as people think, because even with the cuts, you have to have money for signing in-season players and your practice squad, signing your draft picks, and in my opinion, we'll get to this probably, I'm sure, but franchising Jaylen Johnson, that's a chunk, y'all. Like, that's a big chunk, and I think that Chicago's going to have about 22 million left. And here, do you want me to go through how I want to spend it?
Sure.
All right. So, because I think we have to pair, like, we just talked through what the draft is good at. And then I think you have to be like, okay, then what can we do in free agency to parts that we're not going to be able to address in the draft and the spots that we're going to have? And then you're going to build your complete team with depth, which I think is the big thing this offseason. We're going to get depth and not be weak at spots.
Right.
So my first one is center. I know there's people that want to go JPJ, or they're going to go Zach Frazier. But I think whether it's Fields or Caleb Williams, you both of them saw weak interior offensive lines, especially at center, get pushed back in their face, and they struggled. And I don't want to put a rookie in front of them expecting them to solve it all, because sometimes that takes time. I have one center that I want over all the other ones.
I mean,
And there's a lot.
Is it still
Go ahead.
Connor?
Yeah.
Okay. See, you're just not worried about the ACL at all, right?
Well, so here's why. So because
Connor
there's a lot of
Williams,
good,
everybody, by the way.
Connor Williams. There's a lot of good free agent centers. Andre James, Lloyd Cushenberry. People talk about the guy from Seattle. I think it's Evan Brown or something.
Mhm.
But he wasn't that great. There's Aaron Brewer for Tennessee. Like, there's actually 5 free agent centers that were top half of the NFL in terms of PFF rating. But Connor Williams is the only one that's been top 5 2 years in a row, or 2 years at all in his career. Now, he tore his other ACL, Robert, in 2019. Did you know that?
Now that you told me, yes, but no, I
Uh,
didn't know that. And that has me like, oh gosh.
now, how about this? So he tore it in week 13. He came back and played every game the next year. So he
That's
tore
good.
it in week 14 this year.
Am I you make me feel crazy, Nick, for the very normal assertion that there's just some risk involved.
There
And
is risk.
in a pivotal year. So granted, I'm one of the kooks that wants to sign one and then draft one anyways, right?
I do too.
Like, you talk about a JPJ guy. I want Jackson Powers Johnson on the bench as the OL6. Like, if I got to choose, I want him to basically sit and be the guy that is going to step in as a reserve for whether it's Tevin Jenkins getting hurt, whether it's Nate Davis playing his way out of a job, or whether it's at the center for some reason needing replacement and he's ahead of schedule. Like, I don't really care. But to your point, I think the offensive line is so pivotal in this next quarterback season that why would you not over address the problem? right?
Right.
That's at
Right.
least how I see it.
And the other thing, and hold up, let me grab my notebook, y'all, dude. I mean,
Break it out.
you guys know me and Robert are deep into this. Here's the other thing of why I want Connor Williams over some of the other ones, and we don't know what the rookies are going to be like, but there's this thing called RAS, relative athletic score. Okay, looking at the free agent centers, Connor Williams RAS, Robert,
Hmm.
9.15.
Oh yeah, that
That's
was with
that's
both
the
knees.
athleticism that they all want. And so when you have a guy that's peaked eliteness, there's risk with his injuries, which he'll be cheaper and has the athleticism. That's the guy. He's 26. And then you still can, maybe you draft a mid-round guy, or you hope that Doug Kramer is the guy if he's not ready for the first 2 weeks or whatever it is. But to me, I think that helps fill more void. I just think JPJ is going to be a guy that's going to go late round one, mid to early round two, and I think you can't have that be a backup, and especially with interior O line. If it's a swing tackle and guard like was it Graham Barton? Maybe. I just think center interior offensive line backup is tough.
So, granted, a friend of mine told me a while ago, and I've been trying to follow this as best I could because I thought it was really smart at the time, that you should always approach the draft with a 3 year mindset, right? You are drafting in 2024 for 2026, 2027. Not that it can't help in 2024, that's just ahead of schedule, right? And to me, Nick, the moment that we start kidding the entire rookie team around what the Bears have right now is the moment that
Mhm.
I think we start to miss the problems that we're trying to solve. Because the moment that I say, okay, what do you mean? You're drafting for 3 years from now. Well, Nick, in 3 years, Montez Sweat will be 31. In 3 years, DJ Moore will be 30, right? So if you said that the Bears were going to draft an edge rusher, well, that actually makes quite a lot of sense,
Yep.
doesn't it? Because
Yep.
as Montez Sweat fades, so you would expect that the new edge rusher that you just drafted would rise and take his place, right?
Mhm.
Or Roma Dunze, let's say. He starts as a 1B, but as DJ Moore ages, maybe he becomes the 1A as
Yep.
Rome gets better and better. I
Kind of
mean,
like the Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne type thing.
exactly, right?
Yep.
And so I would hope that the Bears are at least a little future minded. And to me, JPJ would be an extremely future minded pick if you did it my way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because I would be planning around something bad happening. Like the
Yep.
expectation that I would have is no, Jackson, you're going to play 8 games. I'm going to be blown away if you don't play 8 games. Like, I don't know which position you're going to be playing him at, but I know you're going to play
Well,
games.
likely. Unfortunately, with Tevin Jenkins. So, okay, so that's one. I have 6 signings in free agency,
Okay.
but they're all bargains. So Connor Williams, Brad Spielberg only has him at 6 million per year.
Oh man, that is just so juicy.
See
Like that's the TJ Edwards deal,
that?
effectively.
Well, Ethan Posick, who I liked last year,
Hmm.
he was 3 years, 18 million. Now
Bizarre
again,
to me. He's been
yep,
so good for Cleveland too.
he is, and but he's not as flashy as Connor is. But Connor has the injury, so there you go. But okay, so the other ones I'll go quickly because I know we got other things we want to talk about. Um, free safety again, bargain because I think that we're going to draft one in the mid rounds. Is Alohi Gilman.
Okay.
So free safety for the Chargers. He was at Navy, then went to Notre Dame. He's not a crazy good athlete, but you can get him cheap. He's 26, I think. Sixth best overall safety this year, fifth best coverage safety this year, and he's a way better tackler than a guy people are going to want to sign named Geno Stone.
I mean, I am all for bargains at safety. Like, as much as I know, it was funny because you talked earlier about how fans always, like, basically fans will throw shade at an offensive coordinator nearly no matter what. Well, there's always that one player that leaves your team that fans just hated at the time. And I'll never forget the way Bears fans absconded. I don't even think that's the right word. The way Bears fans basically shunned Adrian Amos when he left to go to the Packers.
Oh,
And
right.
then the Bears downgraded in a big way, bringing in HaHa Clinton Dix, and then the worst version of Deshaun Gibson that we had after that. But
Who was
evens,
a baller this year, by the
who's
way.
a
He
baller?
was
Where did this
good
come
this
from,
year.
man? Where did this come from? But
I
so
don't get it.
within that, it's like bargains at safety are a position that you can find good play at if you find the right fit. Now,
Yep.
I would also again hope for a sign one draft one. Just
Yep.
because if you're going to cut Eddie Jackson, you need a starter, and I think we need a better third safety than Elijah Hicks, right?
Oh my gosh,
So
yes.
a guy I know I've got my eye on is Auburn's Jalen Simpson, but that's digging into some draft stuff that we'll get to later.
I like Jaden Hicks.
The kid from Washington State,
Yes.
he can't move. Like
I I
the tape I've seen, he is he's a slow burn starter that doesn't have great top speed. He's so big. Like I'm not
I
surprised,
I
right?
know, I know. See, this is gonna be fun. We'll get into prospects, but that right now, that's when I'm like, but I'm thinking like round 4, round 5 for him.
Right. But to me, if you're not fast at this league at DB, you're a touchdown waiting to happen.
Well, okay, so I was okay. Let me pull up in my
Pull
book
out the
again. Okay,
notebook. Pull out
so
the notebook.
I was looking at Raz for safeties that are free agents. Okay, and obviously Antoine Winfield is my dream. Okay, but after seeing our cap space, I'm like, I don't think it'll happen. He's 7.83. All of the other ones that I have, besides Blackman for the Colts, I thought maybe because of the Eberflus connection, he's a possibility. He doesn't have one. Everyone else's RAS is 6.17 or below, and that 6.17 is to Sean Gibson, by the way. Everyone else is below a 6. Like, there's just not athletic safeties that are out there. So I think that safety is, people joke and they're like, well, he plays corner because he can't catch or he play receiver.
Right.
I think that if you're slow, they put you in safety because you can't play corner.
And if you're big, like if
Yes.
you look at some of these corners, like I think my favorite one right now is a kid named Kalen Carson. Like he's not my
Ooh,
favorite,
Wake
right?
Forest.
The Wake Forest kid,
I
right?
mean, he's got long. He's
He's a
good.
spider. Like he
Yep.
looks like a
Long arms,
spider when he
man.
moves. And then
Yep.
Kalen King, completely different spelling, right? But
Different.
the Penn State kid, he
Yep.
can move. He's like if you got Kyler Gordon to be drastically more physical on the outside for better or for worse. And
Way,
then
way better 2 years ago than this year.
oh yeah, like this year it's been pretty up and down, but more than anything, Nick, you'll come to find that I put like probably 60% of my take into how they move compared to how well they play football.
Okay.
And just because for better or for worse, I've seen it where if you move well, your game will translate to the NFL level. If you play good football, but you don't move well, then you're going to get blown up by the guys that do at the next level. But again, that's a conversation for another time. It's more
Well,
to say you're talking about corner and well, actually this may be a decent transition.
that's what I was gonna get to because I got some stuff to talk about. So all right, y'all. We'll come back to my other free agents here. But this is what me and Robert do, right? We get pumped about stuff.
We
We
do.
we have outlines of what we want to talk about, but man, we just get passionate. So you're gonna have to deal with this. Jaylen Johnson. Jaylen Johnson, okay. I and Robert, I think, are both in agreement that we don't want to pay Jaylen Johnson. And so this year was great. I mean, don't get me wrong. And I like Jaylen Johnson. This isn't I don't like him. I do. He has not earned the 21, 22, 23 million per year that he's going to ask for, that he's now asking for in podcasts. And part of that is only one great year. I would say the other years, Robert, are like average, maybe slightly above average or worse. And he's injured. That shoulder is a concern for me. But I have one other thing, and then I'll give you the floor, Robert. And I know I've shared this with you, so you know it's coming. But Brett Coleman, y'all. Okay, again, this isn't just about us. This is we're giving you resources. Brett
Right.
Coleman on Twitter, follow him. YouTube, really smart guy, good follow with football. He put this stat out there. Since 2010, 65% of all pro cornerbacks or I'm sorry, 81% of all pro cornerbacks were in their sixth season in the NFL or less. And then 65% of Pro Bowl corners or in their sixth season in the NFL or less. And what that means is corner ages very quickly and you're left with some bad contracts. I think we can see that over the years. Remember JC Jackson? Again, I know he switched teams. He fell off quickly. Jair Alexander, y'all, hasn't been as great the past couple of years. I know there's some injuries, but it's not the same. So part of that gives me pause with Jaylon too.
So there's this kid that I was watching a little while ago, right? I guess it was last year. His name was Jaylen Jones out of Texas A&M. Not that one, Bears fans. Different guy. Came out in last year's draft. A former 5-star. right? A lot of
Mhm.
people really liked him going into the draft cycle. And I was talking with a friend of mine, right? Because I was watching him and I was like, he's got really good technique. His hips are really solid, but he seems kind of slow. Are you able to draft corners that are slow? And the friend of mine I'm talking to is like a former D2 safeties coach, among other things. He was like, absolutely not. I mean, you just can't live out there. If they can run by you, then you are sunk. It is the Kyler Gordon problem, where in Kyler Gordon's time as an outside corner, which was short lived last year, basically he played 2 games against Philly and against Buffalo, where teams didn't challenge him vertically or like teams didn't challenge his long speed. And then the Lions picked up on it. And Nick, the first 5 plays that they ran, 3 of them were take Kyler Gordon deep for all his lunch money. And the Bears had some pass rush that bailed him out on 2 of them, and one of them was a long completion. It is so funny when you talk about that Coleman stat because what does that show you? Well, it shows you that if you lose a step, you are
Yep.
dead out there.
Yep.
Like you can't hang out there. And
Mhm.
so at least I look at that and I think to myself, it's funny. You mentioned earlier talking about like, well, I think both of us don't want to pay Jaylon. And I'm the jackwagon that would sit across from Jaylon and be like, Jaylon, I want to pay you. You know I have to tag you, right? And we'll see what happens this year. But now you've got me wondering, Nick, if this is a basically a hostile negotiation for better or for worse, where the
Yep.
Bears kind of have to place the tag, and then maybe they probably don't draft somebody this year just because they've got other directions that they may want to go,
Mhm.
but then they could draft somebody and keep the secondary relatively young and let Jaylon walk and hit free agency just because, like you're talking about, at that point he'd be what 25? Would it be 26? So I
Be
could
the yep.
also understand a short deal if the Bears wanted to get something 3 or 4 years, 1 to 2 guaranteed. I could see it if he keeps this up,
He
but
doesn't want a short deal.
I don't think he wants a short deal. But
No.
also, guaranteed money is guaranteed money, right?
It is. It is. And that's the tough part is like and I y'all, I read your comments, and then someone like, "We don't wanna hear that Jaylen Johnson talk. They're signing." This is also a business. This is what's gonna be. We're not paying you for what you did. We're gonna pay for what you will be. And what is he gonna be? Is he gonna be the top right corner next year? Robert, I would pay almost anything that he's not gonna be the top corner
No,
next year
probably not.
or any other year. So you think like it's the worst kind of going forward. And so, I mean, kind of as you said, I mean, you have 2 young corners that you're kind of developing, and you'll see what happens there as insurance. Kyler could go outside if you need to, and you might draft another guy to be your 4th corner. Like that might be kind of where you go, or 4th outside corner. Sorry.
If it was me, at the very least, I would try to tag him and use the tag as leverage to get him on something around the tag's value for longer term. Because to me, if you sign the deal now, it makes a lot more sense than trying to sign that deal in a year, just given his age timeline, right?
Mhm.
Like it's funny you mentioned the 61% of corners that are in their 6th year or less. Jaylon was also a baby when he got to the NFL. Like he was so young that the hope would be that his at least lower half can stay in or can basically stay young for a little bit longer. So the idea that he's got more length in him makes a lot of sense to me. Not to mention, Nick, I'm a big believer in having an experienced CB1. Now, you have to have them be experienced and also young enough to run with these guys, or that doesn't matter, right?
Yep.
Like in the NFL, you have to have your CB1 take on DK Metcalf. And if he can't beat DK Metcalf, there's no point. It is over.
Mhm.
You are
Yep.
toast out there, right?
Yep.
But I don't think Tyreek is there yet. I think Tyreek needs another year being the CB2. God knows he got targeted enough, and we all saw it. But if it was me, and frankly, if I was Matt Eberflus, just to push back on us a little bit, Nick, you
Sure.
want this guy signed because you kind of need 2024 and 2025 to produce a playoff team.
Yes,
And
you do.
running a guy who nearly locked off entire half or like an entire half of the field for the back half of the season, like that's somebody that you can't let walk. And screw the 2026 cap. I don't care.
Well,
Like I'm
and it
coaching
and it
right now.
helps and it helps the locker room, right? You sign a guy that's done well. But here's my other counter to all this, y'all, is we saw Jaylen Johnson the first, whatever, half of the year, and did it matter for the defense? Not at all. The Bears defense was
No.
trash. Montez Sweat comes, changes everything. So we know what a defensive end pass rusher can do to change a defense, and does a corner matter as much? So you let's say you save the money, Robert. Let's say you trade away Jaylen Johnson for a second. We'll just say you don't get the first that you want, even though Poles has said he wants to keep him, right? You get a second and you use that money and you get Daniil Hunter. Would you do it?
I probably wouldn't, but that's only because it sounds like Nick, you and I. So I look at the Chargers, right? The Chargers had Khalil Mack. The Chargers had Joey Bosa. The Chargers had a horrible secondary. And did those edge rushers matter? No, they did not. The Chargers were one of the worst defenses in football because to me, you need both, right? You need solid DBs. And then when you have a pass rush in front of them, those DBs suddenly turn into list makers, right? That's where you get your second team All Pro from Jaylen Johnson. Thank you, Montez Sweat, right? But it's so funny, Nick, because we talk about this. Like, offense to me is more individualistic. Yes, you need your offensive line to come through for you, right? But you can call a play where the only people that really matter are your wide receiver one and your tight end, like your primary tight end, and everybody else is an afterthought within that play call, right? Not that
Yep.
your running back doesn't matter, not that the second wide receiver on whatever pattern he's running doesn't matter, but that they're less important because they're not the original plan.
Yeah. Or the first read. Yeah.
Right. Within defense, oh, bro, you need everybody. Like, defense is so hard to put together because you are about as strong as your weakest link. And beyond that, it is very easy for pressure to burst pipes. And so I'm going to be really interested in what the Bears want to do. I
Mhm.
think that Jaylen is the right guy, at least talking this out with you, Nick. Jaylen is the right guy to me to potentially hand a contract you know is overvalued if you can get his number down to a swallowable pill just to put the locker room in the right headspace
Yep.
for 2024 and 2025 before you start making business decisions. I mean, you look at the salary cap that they have coming up. I don't know where the cap is falling off, but in 2024, they've got $55 million of cap space, and that was with some manipulation. I just realized actually it's so funky, right? I traded the quarterback, I cut Eddie Jackson, I cut Cody Whitehair, and I tagged Jaylen Johnson, and they're left with $55 million. But then in 2025, they have $125 million, and in
Mhm.
2026 they have $208 million. And I'm sure
Mhm.
plenty of that is just churn that we're going to see from the roster. But I do wonder. Here's a question: Poles have been front loading deals so far. Do you think that stops?
I think it's gonna be interesting. They've had very even deals, and I think that's interesting as well. So, and we've talked about this too. If they go with Fields, I think that they will backload deals to stay under the cap because they know things are going to be coming. But I think that if they or no, I'm sorry, they'll front load deals. Sorry, because they know that they'll have to pay him eventually. But I think if they draft a rookie quarterback, I think they will backload deals because that's when you make your run during that rookie contract. And so if you can push off the money, you'll have that 4 or 5 year run to try to go for it. And I think that's what they'll do. Now here's the interesting thing. You said if he'll take something around the franchise cap number. So for people to know, if they franchise Jaylen Johnson, it's $18.421 million.
Right.
If the Bears can sign him to a 4 year deal around that number with 2 years of that being guaranteed, I'm all for it, but I don't think that's what he's going for, y'all.
I can't help but sit here and think guaranteed money talks. Like, if I was
Mhm.
you, or if I was him and I was you, and I was talking to Jalen's agent, I'd be like, Jaylen, we want you here, man.
Yeah.
Like, I'll even guarantee you 2.5 years of it. Like, that's fine.
I mean,
But
40 million guaranteed, and you got that shoulder.
yes, like that to me, this is what you'd have to do to get the deal done, right?
Yep.
And I really will trade cap number for having the guy in the locker room and having him be a thumbs up guy, like a we guy in this case instead of just a me guy. But like you're
Mhm.
talking about, I mean, if I got to choose between $23 million AAV with 1.5 guaranteed, because sometimes you see a deal like that get struck, right? Versus a little bit more guarantees, even though he gets injured. I mean, you got to remember how few of these corners actually play an entire 17-game season. It's really rare. So, as much as it stinks to have Jaylen Johnson's shoulder be as problematic as it is, it's pretty industry standard. so long as he doesn't tear his ACL, and I'm gonna knock on wood for that. But
Yeah.
it's a complex decision, man. Like, because it's not pass rusher, it's not offensive tackle, it's not wide
Mhm.
receiver one. It's a position that everybody likes to cheap out on, and then gets really mad that their cheap option isn't any good,
Yeah.
right?
No, or they're getting picked on. Like we saw Green Bay just picking on the one 49er corner endlessly that game. All right. So I'm going to transition and go through the rest of my signings quickly. And
Let's do
then
it.
we probably go DC, maybe talk. Okay.
Let's
Um,
mention some DC stuff, but man, let's talk playoffs before we get out of here.
yeah, sure we can. So my other quick signings I did, and that was in this exercise that'll be in the video at Football Guys, is so I have two D linemen, Robert, that are veterans over 30 that I thought you could sign to bring in to help nurture the young guys,
Uh huh.
teach the young guys, but still give you something. And I also like that they're both guys that have been playoff teams, so they'll have some leadership there and they'll help. I think that's an underrated thing. Having guys that have that mindset of we're going playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Think of Tremaine, think of TJ Edwards. Like
Mm-hmm.
like it was different. It wasn't just money. They're like, we want to win. Like that's why we're here. Shelby Harris, defensive tackle, was at Cleveland. He's
Oh
been
yeah.
good at a few different teams. Seattle before that. There's a connection there, y'all. 1 year, 3 million is what they expected from him. I think he's like 32, 33. The other one, defensive end, Brandon Graham.
Oh man, that guy's
One,
the Philly guy, right?
yeah, he's 35.
Did he just recently get cut, then
He's a
picked
free
up
agent.
somewhere else?
He's a free agent.
Man, he'd be an interesting one, if only because I wonder what Walker could learn from him. But I didn't realize that Walker is 30. Like Demarcus Walker is 30 years old.
Is he? Is he really?
That's what Over the Cap is saying, which I was like,
No way.
what?
No way. I'm looking this up.
Yeah, Demarcus Walker,
Give me
7
more.
seasons.
Oh,
He's 30 years
29 is
old.
what I have.
Well, I think I'm looking at the 2024, so it probably rolls up their ages
Oh, yeah, he
for
turns
at least a
30
year.
September 30th next year.
Ooh, right?
There you go. Never mind. But yeah, so because I thought, Graham, again, how many playoff teams has that guy been on? He is
A
a good
bunch.
leader. I watched can't remember what it was, one of the TV shows he's on in terms of like I don't know if it's Hard Knocks or one of them. And then also he's still effective. He was like Robert, he was like a top 30 DN this year.
That's
So
hilarious.
so those two. Then I have a tight end and a receiver that are bargains.
The receiver, is it Tyler Boyd?
No,
Who is it?
because I got to go cheaper because I have it as 22 million we'll have to spend.
Okay.
I have Noah Brown for the Texans.
Man. Noah
He,
Brown, former Cowboy, right?
former Cowboy, 6'2", 215, athleticism, but he's overshadowed by Nico Collins and Tank Dell,
Mm-hmm.
and he has a chance to be that number two. No, we don't know what Chicago's going to do, right?
Probably
Well,
won't, but we'll love to tell him he will.
well,
Right?
hey, you sell to him like Byron Pringle, like, hey man, maybe you could,
Yeah, because that
and
worked
then
so well with Byron Pringle,
uh,
anyways.
I know that's one, and then the other one is so I have two chances here. The other guy was more expensive, so I didn't go with him. The other guy would be following Shane Waldron. So that's another thing we got to think about, y'all. Is like he has guys on Seattle. I mean, the center that we talked about, right? Evan Brown, or and this one is Colby Parkinson is a tight end that you could think
Mm-hmm.
of. Noah Fant's a free agent as well. DJ Dallas. The guy I thought that they could bring in is Mike Gesicki. Tall,
Okay.
athletic, kind of your move tight end, could be a slot guy, but bring some size. Like, 'cause I think they need a little bit more size.
Do you
And
think he's still got it?
it's 1 year, $2 million. I think he's probably 28.
I hope
That's fine
so.
for that. I mean, that's just like they did last year, but hopefully this tight end too works out.
It's so funny you talk about this, Nick, if only because as I'm looking at the Bears cap situation, I mean, to your point, it is easy to forget that there is a small drawback to having 2 first-round picks, and that's that they are not actually that cheap. And like they're cheap compared to if they play at an all-pro level. But
Yes.
you're talking about $15 million. Like that's a pretty sweet free agent that you could spend on with 2 first-round picks, but instead that could be whoever you take at number 1 plus whoever you take at number 9. So I'm
Mhm.
not saying the Bears should trade back for financial reasons. That would be just the stupidest reason. Like that would be really pretty stupid. But
And it gets cheaper real quick. Like number 20 is probably half of what number 9 is going to
I
make.
think so. And so it'll be really interesting to see what they do there. And then
Mhm.
you talked a little bit about defensive coordinator. You tell me what you're thinking, but like to me, the lack of noise that we've seen from defensive coordinator has almost seemed like Poles slapping his hand on Flus's shoulder and being like, "Yeah, you know the reason we're keeping you is because you're our defensive play caller going forward. You
Mhm.
know this, right?"
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, I agree with you, and both of the guys. So Chris Harris is the one interview, which Bears fans, I hope you remember him from the playoff teams in
Mhm.
Chicago. I was a big Chris Harris fan. Again, talking about a guy that wasn't overly athletic, Robert. That was Chris Harris in the right spot a lot, but just not overly athletic. And then, interestingly enough, another one of his defensive coaching partners is Terrell Williams, the D line and assistant head coach with the Titans, is also interviewed. Um, I I like it from a couple points of view. I like the Titans defense because I think that they milk so much more out of their players, that, like talent, because they don't have a lot of money. They don't have a tons of talent in Tennessee, but man, they like make those guys into just like way better than they are. I mean, you have I know Jeffrey Simmons is obviously is a complete stud, but they make those guys, I think, just in that defense way more formidable. Um, and I know this year was a little bit of a struggle. They had some injuries, but over the years, I mean, and that like Vrabel's the same thing. That's why I have so much respect for Mike Vrabel's. Like they're winning games and in ball games. And I'm like, dude, you guys are so much more overmatched versus your opponent. But that's coaching. And so those are the coaches I want to chase. So those are the two that I've heard of. Have you heard of any others?
No, I haven't heard of any, partially because it sure seems as if the Bears were looking for this offensive play caller first and foremost, and then they'll go looking for somebody who's going to wear the mantle of defensive coordinator, but he's ultimately going to be like an ideas bringer and a heavy quality control guy, right? At least that's the impression that I get is how can we find somebody with a slightly different perspective from our own that can
Yeah.
come in, offer up some really good ideas that then I, as your head coach, am going to use when I call the
Mhm,
plays. And hey,
mhm,
I'm just saying, the Bears have attempted from the start here to be future forward. They
yep,
really have. Like,
yep,
even in running what seems like an antiquated defense at times, you have to remember that as this whole league shifts towards the 3-4 with a bunch of too high, the Bears playing also a bunch of too high, but using all the players that become cast offs from all these other organizations is our way to try to add more talent like TJ Edwards when everybody else wants to move on to find the next Fred Warner, right? At
yep.
least that's the aim. And so, in that same way, Nick, I can't believe I'm saying this, the Bears are trying to turn Matt Eberflus into defensive Kyle Shanahan, right? Like
Mhm,
the offensive head or the offensive play caller mold, but
yep.
instead it's the defensive play caller. It sure
Well,
seems as if, yeah.
the other thing I think that's interesting is so Flus's background is linebackers, right?
Hmm.
So both of these interviews are D line and DBs. So like you wonder if they're like, hey, yo, your specialty was making Shaq Leonard who he is, and we got
Hmm.
you TJ Edwards in Maine, right? But now let's bring in a DB defensive coordinator or a D line defensive coordinator to match you, so that can be their specialty. Then you got two of the three already knocked out, and you're still gonna have your assistants. I get it, but I'm just saying like maybe you can tell us more because I know Tennessee had, and this is one thing I really liked about them. They had a lot of simulated pressures, Robert,
Right.
before it was a thing this year. They did it 2 years ago, and I was like, oh man, this is some really nice stuff. And so, maybe bringing either of those guys to be like, hey, this is stuff that's in my repertoire. I'll bring that to Chicago. You can do that with your two athletic linebackers and Kyler Gordon, et cetera, and we'll take it to the next level.
I can't wait, man. I mean, we'll see what happens, but I look at those and I'm just really excited about the Bears continuing to expand their horizons and us getting a chance. I mean, you know this, Nick. You and I are first of all, obviously we're rabid, avid Bears fans. So, at the end
Yeah.
of the day, like we would just love to see the Bears make a move, but also I'm always open to being wrong. Like, let's challenge some ideas. The Bears clearly have a different way that they
Yep.
want to go about trying to build this thing. When everybody's trying to build it one way, they are trying to build it another. Okay,
Mhm.
prove us wrong.
Yeah.
Like, show me that the other direction works. I'm
Mhm.
so ready to see it. I hope they're right.
Yeah.
because there are going to be some serious advantages to if they can build this thing their way. I mean, there's reasons to be dubious, right?
Oh,
But
yeah. I mean, honestly, like, if you're the first person that goes outside the box, people don't know how to defend you. They don't know how to have a game plan for you, and there's advantages there, which just being different, there's advantages to it. But Robert, let's get to the reason why people got to this podcast. Okay, today,
yeah,
why have you been so sick for so long, man?
my baby, man, he's a little petri dish. He goes to daycare because he like his mother and I, but we're married, both work. And so because of that, he just brings home a new disease. And this time it was a stomach bug. When's the last time you had a stomach bug, Nick?
A long time, but I work with kids. I work at a high school.
And you work at a high school. I'm talking these babies. Like, I don't know what goes on in those little bodies, but they're like walking disease bomb petri dishes. And so, like, stomach bug in particular was just a nasty one to cut or to deal with because I was like, I haven't had one of these in
Okay,
20
so like,
years.
do we do maybe this is intervention time, y'all. Okay, like maybe give some advice to Robert here, things that he can help. I mean, like multivitamin, emergency man, like maybe you need to gargle like some salt water. You know what I mean? Like maybe this is gonna be like a daily, weekly routine, because you're missing out on pods, man. Like
What are
your
you talking about?
stream, stuff like that. The people need a healthy Robert.
The people need a healthy Robert, absolutely, but they also need content, and that's what I'm here delivering, right? And speaking of, I cannot remember who picked what last week, as far
Oh.
as playoffs go.
I
Like,
I messaged you. You like that one, right?
which one specifically?
Remember because you said that Houston was going to cover?
I did think Houston was going to cover, and you know what? For the first half, it sure looked like it. You know what I mean? This has unfortunately been my MO where I'm right until I'm very wrong, right? And like, gosh, man, that was a sweet game too. Because
Mm.
coming out of the half, like Jalen Petrie gets his hands on a ball that if he's able to pull down, who knows? Maybe it shifts the tone of the game, but he doesn't. And so
No.
like, what a wonderful football game. Honestly, credit to the Texans for getting to where they were, but I mean, the Ravens are just a better team, right?
Mhm, mhm. And
Did
honestly, every
yeah,
time they ran the ball, Houston was a waste, and it was like, "Oh my gosh," you could just see how different the defensive front was, and got you excited about that D tackle. I forgot his name, Justin M for Baltimore,
yep.
but I don't think Chicago can afford him. And then, I mean, Stroud is fantastic as y'all obviously can see, but he was just so overmatched because it was him versus like the world, and he didn't have enough time to throw. I don't
I'm
remember all of our picks because then you have
I'm gonna hit you with
you
a hot take, Nick.
shoot.
Here's my hot take. Outside of Mahomes, the whole point of having a Stroud level quarterback is to elevate your team against similarly matched regular season opponents. Yes, of course, you want a good quarterback, like in general. Who doesn't, right?
Right,
But
right.
the big key is not to beat the Ravens. Everybody knows that when you play the best defensive football, you need more weapons than just your quarterback, right? And that's where the fact that they've got a pretty bad offensive line and a running game that does not work and one receiver because their other receiver got hurt, like there's just not enough blades in the
Come
in the
on,
kit
Bobby
anymore.
Slowick. I thought he was the whisperer, man.
I can't. The
I'm just
offensive, I know the offensive coordinator can only deploy the chess pieces that he has, and that was like,
I know, bro. I
I
know.
know you do. That was like rolling out with a queen. So hey, you've got the queen in your quarterback, and then you got what, one rook and some pawns, but that was it
Oh yeah.
against a full chess
Oh,
deck.
I've been in those games. You don't say it. You don't say it, but you know it. You know, you're like, "Ooh."
I bet you
But
sit there,
like, guys,
hands.
hey, they lace up their cleats just like we do. Like you have that talk.
And then
I don't remember the other ones though, because I don't remember because I think we were different with Detroit, Tampa. I don't remember. I think you picked Tampa or did I pick
if
Tampa?
I actually had the stones to pick Tampa, I am such a goober, and I apologize
We
because
we we disagreed on one. I can't remember. I picked
well, we
Buffalo. I
we
was wrong on that one.
definitely agree, or we definitely disagreed on KC and
Yep.
Buffalo, and oh my gosh, what a game! Like that is one of those games where I'm so thankful that we aren't tied down to like the Buffalo franchise because I would be beside
Well,
myself.
okay. This is slightly different than playoffs, and we'll get back to it. That watching that game, and then watching Jim Harbaugh just get signed, y'all. to coach the Chargers. And because I like Harbaugh, I think he's a very good coach. He's going to get them better. And you got Stroud in Baltimore. Has me so excited that the Bears are in the NFC because
Yeah.
it is such an easier conference to. And you think about like wanting to get Super Bowl, you know, possibly
Man,
runs for Chicago. It's way easier to do multiple of those or even one of those in the NFC.
whether it's Fields, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, or freaking Bo Nix that the Bears ultimately roll with next year, I bet it's not Bo Nix. But
I don't
if
mind them.
whatever they do, the path to being the best quarterback in the NFC is a completely different path to being the best quarterback in the NFL.
Who is it
Like,
right now? If you had to pick one, who's the best quarterback in the NFC?
best quarterback in the NFC? Gosh. Let me see. You've put me justifiably on the spot, but this comes down to the conversation of like how good do you think Brock Purdy is, right? Because in the band of what we normally call talent, like he's less talented than a lot of his compatriots, but he is a quarterback's quarterback, right? I'd probably who am I missing? Because he can't be
'Cause
Goff.
so you go through the list. I don't think any of them are top 5 right now in the NFL. You got Hurts, Dak, Purdy, Goff, throw Jordan Love in there. Some people love him right now. Cousins, Stafford.
Except Cousins is a free agent. And
Yeah,
so,
but I
and
mean,
I specifically
whatever.
say that because no, he doesn't count
Ba
until he goes back
Baker,
to mini.
Baker.
If it was me, I'd probably say it's Dak, but I'd
Me
roll my
me too.
eyes as I did because
But where does that rank in the NFL?
that's the thing. I've been telling Dallas fans ever since his second
8.
season. To me, Dak Prescott is the goodest quarterback in the NFL without an ounce of great. And this
Goodest.
last playoff appearance only made that hot takely phrase take feel even more true because,
Yeah.
man, I have been dying for Dak to live up to one of these big moments. And I know how unfair that is, right? Because he and
No.
the Cowboys have won so many games, but sheesh, Nick. Like, I am just blown away.
Bro, I picked Buffalo to beat Dallas. That was my playoff pick, and look where I'm at right now.
It's okay. All I did was pick the best quarterback and be like, they're gonna win. And
Yeah.
then, oh my gosh, man! Talking about that game, what was crazy to me is that for as back and forth and wonderful as that football game was, they were Mecole Hardman not basically making Andy Reid tear his own mustache out from closing the game up early. Like
They couldn't stop Kansas City.
Kansas City looked outrageous
I
on
have you ever
offense.
there was a stat I saw. It was like the EPA for Mahomes in the playoffs versus everybody else, and then it was like point 0.3 higher against Buffalo.
Oh
Like,
my gosh.
Sean McDermott just gets owned by Kansas City.
So speaking of, let's get to you don't even have to get you could pick if you want to, but tell me what you think about these games. Like, are you Baltimore in this? Or do you think that Mahomes proves too much?
So, I know I've coached with 2 guys on Baltimore staff.
Hmm.
So, I preface that with, I'm picking Kansas City because I'm not betting against Mahomes anymore.
And now he's gonna lose. I'm kidding.
Yeah, right?
So I can't help but think, Nick, that the Spagnola defense is the wrong defense for a guy like Lamar Jackson. Where if he's got one little weakness, it's that he really hates getting blitzed. And that Spags
Mhm.
defense is totally fine blitzing you. And they've got corners that can hang with these
Yep.
Baltimore receivers. Whereas Houston making it to the second phase of the dance. Look, it's the same thing that we could say about the Lions, right? And I really don't mean any disrespect. Yes, I thought the Lions were going to go one and done. They didn't. They beat a good Rams team and they took care of business against the, you know, whatever.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
deserve to be where they are. Making
right.
an NFC Championship game, even by hook or by crook, is something that I would celebrate if it was the Bears in it. So I can't take an ounce away from the Lions. But it is
Mhm.
funny, isn't it, Nick? Where you look at this Baltimore team and you're like, okay, we've seen them against the Texans, the Cinderella team that was happy to be there in many cases. What does this mean they're going to be against a Kansas City team where, to me, the biggest X factor that Josh Allen did just ignored for the entirety of the game is that this Chiefs defense, the best defense we've seen in Kansas City in 4 years. And so if they come out there and they keep the score even relatively low, like what if you looked in your crystal ball, Nick, and you saw Baltimore scores 23 points? Does Kansas City win?
Yes.
I tend to agree with you where good luck stopping Mahomes that thoroughly, but that one should be a hell of a game. That one
Yeah.
should be wild.
Well, especially because like Baltimore has a good defense, so you're like, well, defense wins. Kansas City has a good defense too, y'all. Like that's the thing is like it's not like they have that kind of trump card. The trump card is if Baltimore can stop Kansas City's offense, because I think they're going to limit Baltimore's offense for
Mhm.
sure.
It would be such a middle finger to the NFL public if Mahomes wins a third Super Bowl this year. Like,
But I'm one of those people where some people are like I don't like whoever it is, whatever sport, because they win too much. I love greatness. I'm
if
okay with it.
not to mention, if you want to see Travis Kelsey hang it up and the Chiefs have to go through some real turmoil, like he wins this one, he's out.
He's
Don't we
not
all know?
retiring. He's not retiring.
You don't think so?
No.
Oh man, I get big retire vibes.
He's got
Like,
he's got a lot of money coming up. He already said he's not retiring in a press conference.
well, yeah, you have to, right?
I guess.
All right,
Okay.
let's talk about the other game.
Other one. Okay. Do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
I'm gonna let you go first this time.
All right. So I am so happy for Detroit. Like,
Congratulations.
this is. I know they're in division. I am so like literally. I'm like, this is awesome for them. They're NFC Championship game, etc.
Amazing.
Um, it's not going to be close, y'all. And here's
I
and here's
instantly knew where you were going with this.
but also here's why. And I know you guys know that I always look in depth on this stuff. Jonah Jackson and Frank Ragnow, the interior of the offensive line, I think might not even play. They didn't even practice today. They have so many injuries. I'm not sure that they play. Laporta's a DMP with that knee. We'll see how he does. That I don't even care about Debo because like he could play, he could not play with that shoulder. But if you don't have the interior O line there against this front, and you already know you're overmatched, and that defense for Detroit is what it is. I'm sorry, man. It's a good story. Nope. Nope.
Eventually, you have to think the fact that they're starting Kendall Vildor and Cam Sutton is gonna come
If
back to
Kendall
bite 'em.
Vildor like
Makes
has
a
a
Super
game-winning
Bowl.
play or a pick six, I mean, what are Bears fans gonna do?
I'm gonna laugh, is what I'm gonna do. But I sit here, I look at Brandon Ayuk, I look at a lot of the weapons that they've got in San Francisco, and I think to myself, oh, it's the wrong game to have a bad corner. Right? Hey, maybe Jack Campbell stands on his head. Maybe that Detroit offense is simply unstoppable. But I just I can't stop myself from looking at this San Francisco team and seeing a defense that's capable of pulling the Bears and just shutting down this Detroit offense. I mean, isn't it so funny that the further the Lions go, the wilder the Bears bottling them twice
I
looks?
know.
I
Is
mean,
it, is it, I think that's part of it though. If the Bears got blown out twice by Detroit, we'd be like, oh no, they're legit. They're really good. But the Bears beat them and should have beat them another time. You're like,
we're the wrong people to ask. We're the people that
mm,
can't stop thinking about two games where we're like frauds. You know what
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. Well, you see this and you're like that game right there, that would have been the Bears in the playoffs
I think if
or
Lamar
close.
made a Super Bowl, super duper good for him. Like that would be awesome. To me, the 40 or Brock Purdy is going to the ship. Like unless he gets hurt, I just can't help but think that this is Mr. Irrelevant in the Super Bowl and the media is going to have a ball with it. The question is which NFL MVP is he going to face, right? And either way, man, oh, what a redemption arc it could be for Kyle Shanahan. Like,
Yep.
on top of the fact that I would argue the 49ers look very vulnerable. Like, as as good as I think that this young Packers team is, did you think they were like 1 minute last possession good against the 49ers?
The, so there's two ways to kind of think about this. I thought that they were very lucky in that game. I mean, you could, and again, this is where I talk about that. Like they had the really good kick return that he fumbles, and there's one Packer and like 5 49ers, and he gets it. And then there's the deep pass interference call, which like was it, hey, I'm gonna throw up, underthrow it, and just lean into him and get a call. I kind of think maybe that's what it was to Bill Melton. And Debo going out, like, it was so many things of like, wow, this is just you were like, when is San Francisco gonna wake up and start playing? So that game, there was the same kind of feeling as Dallas. So you're like, these teams just really underachieved twice, or and again, this is me not being a hater. Are the Packers playing really good ball right now?
Could be both.
And you're like, they're making the good teams look bad.
I mean, it really could be, right? Especially because the Packers always had talent on their defense. We just got so accustomed to Joe Barry using it poorly.
Whoa,
R.I.P. Joe
whoa, whoa,
Barry.
whoa. They have first round picks, former first round picks on their defense. I don't know if it's talent.
Oh, come on. You'd be saying that they were talented if they were Bears.
But that's all they say. There's 8 first round picks on this team. Yeah, Laquan Treadwell was a first round pick too, man.
Totally, but Quay Walker's big and fast. Devontae
Darnell
Wyatt.
Savage is a
I,
first round pick.
I loved Devontae Wyatt coming out of school. We've seen a little bit from him, but not a ton. Lucas Van Ness is just a huge person, like TM. But like you're saying, I mean, they've got a bunch of high investment on that Green Bay defense. You would expect turnover. I'm curious to see what they do with defensive coordinator. No doubt Bears Twitter will tell me it's the wrong hire, despite the fact that they've done that for Rashad Gary, Brian Gutekunst, Jordan Love. I would love to see the Packers like catch a bad break one of these days, but we'll get there. Nick,
It was nice to see Jordan Love look human again, because he was looking very not human, and Packers receivers were wide open with everyone falling down in multiple playoff games. And it's like, well, okay, there's the team that we saw against like the Giants in Carolina, where it's like, okay, they're not perfect.
look, my only hope when it comes to Bears Packers is that the Packers really do take a phenomenal 8-game stretch and make him a 52, 55 million a year quarterback. And if they do, I mean, I'm not saying good luck just because it's not that easy, or it's not that you get what I'm saying, Nick, where it's like you're going to hard limit your ceiling, but if you do have a good quarterback, well, you're still going to win quite a few games at that point. It's just going to limit what you can achieve. And
Yeah.
especially if Love takes any step back, because now there's no track record other than like a sweet 8-game stretch, right?
Mhm.
But it'll be really interesting to see what happens with the Packers and the Bears just
It,
over the next 3 years.
I'm way more excited about the Bears. That's all I'm going to say.
I agree. Either way. Nick, what's coming up? You mentioned your video. Anything
Yeah,
else?
that's all I got right now. That's all I got. I'm actually helping out a high school quarterback from a different state,
Yes,
helping him work on some of his skills, because hey man, I mean, this is a beautiful game. We all love
it
this game.
is.
We're passionate about it, and if I can help a young kid be a better quarterback, I'm going to do it. So I got that going on. I'm going to be a guest on another Bears podcast. Maybe
Yes.
keep your ears open for that one tomorrow. And that's about it, man.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go through a bunch of Shane Waldron All 22 tonight. This is airing on Thursday, so that's tonight. And if not, go check out the VOD, or like the VOD. What is it? The video on demand, I guess. The recording of the dang stream. Whatever.
Okay.
The language these kids are using. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? But so outside of that, I'm going to be prepping to go to the Senior Bowl in Mobile next week, which should be awfully fun. So ask me any corner, safety, or wide receiver question you want, and I'll probably have an answer. But until next time, Bears fans, hey, thank you so much for listening. Review us on any streaming or whatever service you want. We really appreciate your reviews. Want to get this thing up there so that more Bears fans can find a podcast that we're really pouring our heart and soul into. And until next time, bear down, and thank you so much for bearing with me.